Welcome, dear friends, to Tales of Gen X Terror, where we unpack the apocalyptic dread underneath the skin of late Cold War pop culture. My name's Neil, and I'm 65 million years old. This week, we're looking at a one-shot story from my youth. DC Comics Presents was a long-running Superman team-up book that occasionally visited some of the characters from DC Comics' junk drawer. The book was one of my favorites, and this issue had an impact for sure. The early 80s zeitgeist was full of baggage from the 1950s. Personally, I remember how shook I was after catching scenes from The Day the World Ended, an old B-movie, or numerous episodes of The Twilight Zone. Like, who can remember Time Enough at Last, where, a bomb goes off and your life is ruined because your glasses are broken. Looking at that period as a non-historian, maybe it was just that old shows were cheap in syndication, or perhaps the transition from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan really shifted America's worries from the gas crisis and unemployment to mutually assured destruction and the Star Wars defense program. For me, that was just about where this comic fits in. Here's a sweet, sweet cover. Red sky, Superman flying into our face through a wrecked city. Next to him, I don't know who this is. It's a knight on a horse-sized Dalmatian. And the text right underneath that logo, a startling preview of the Great Atomic War of 1986. I cannot wait to open this, so let's go. And we open up on a wrecked Daily Planet globe. Metropolis is in ruins. Rocketed as a baby from the doomed planet Krypton, Kal-El grew to become Earth's first and greatest superhero. But when World War III erupts, will the man of tomorrow be there? Or must the world rely on a new breed of metal-clad protectors? Answers await as DC Comics presents Superman and the Atomic Knights! Let's take a look at that first panel. What's happened to me? Where am I? Great Krypton! This is Metropolis, and it's been utterly devastated, as if by an atomic war! Days of future past. Superman is in a wrecked Metropolis. How could this happen without my even knowing? Here come some armor-clad people. Maybe they can tell me something. What's happened to Metropolis? Its populace? Dead, mostly. Killed back in 86 during the Great Atomic War, shortly thereafter by radiation. But who? Great heavens, Gardner, do you realize who this is? It's Superman. Superman? Good Lord, where were you when the bombs fell? It was your job to stop this from happening. Bombs? War of 86? I don't know what... Suddenly, the angry knight's accusation is joined by a chorus of ghostly cries. Where were you? Why did you let us die? Where? Why? Die? No! 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 Oh, thank goodness, it's only a dream. No! It was all a nightmare, the same one I had last night. But I have the ominous feeling it's not just a dream. That sense of foreboding is reinforced in the next several hours. That day, Clark reports on a potential Soviet attack. Our top story, American military forces went on full alert today when the Pentagon's early warning system mistakenly signaled the launch of a Soviet attack. Then, almost through sheer luck, the initial data were found to be inconsistent with other reconnaissance sources, and plans for massive retaliation were halted, but not before Russia had already noted the sudden U.S. move to full alert status. Only an immediate hotline call cooled things down with the explanation that the alert had resulted from a computer malfunction. Though the immediate danger has passed, there is concern that vast suspicions may have been left in its wake, and no one knows if calm heads will prevail should a similar situation arise again. Soon Superman rushes to the Fortress of Solitude to try to figure out where the glitch in the system is happening. He puts on his cool-ass headset. My intelligence sources say the Russians have also been plagued by computer breakdowns recently. I must know if a single cause is responsible for the problems with their computers, the Pentagon's, and my own. This device will allow my brain to check the computer's calculations and other internal processes. Yes! Superman finds himself on the outskirts of a mysterious village, and he's greeted by a friendly voice. Superman, it's so good to see you. Superman is greeted by Gardner Grail and the rest of the Atomic Knights, Wayne and Hollis Hobart, Douglas Harold and his sister Marine, and the Greek demigod Hercules. And then there are reports of a radiation monster attacking New York City. So Superman flies off there, followed by the Atomic Knights. Grail said that on the Knights' previous adventure in New York, they discovered the people had been devolved to cavemen by excess radiation. But fortunately, the Knights managed to get through to the kernel of humanity that still remained in their Cro-Magnon form. So that's our radiation beastie. Very threatening, but I've handled bigger and worse in my time. Of course, the monster has kryptonite breath. Rao, help me! That sudden pain! It's kryptonite poisoning! Can't maintain my flight! The monster gets taken down by the Knights and Hercules, but Superman is not having any of that business. There's something very off about your post-nuclear world. You talk as though your war was totally destructive, yet you seem to be doing fine with plenty of goods and equipment to rebuild with. And what about radiation? Debilitating and fatal diseases would ravage mankind in the years after a nuclear war, but Durvale doesn't even have a hospital. Gardner Grail does not take kindly to Superman's questions. Hold on a second, you can't. And if you're not willing to join in, you can just get out of my world. What in the name of Rao? Phoom! Eh? I'm still in the fortress. Then it was all some sort of fantasy world I was drawn into. But how? And whose fantasy is it? That's a mystery that will take us to Star Labs, where the real-life Marine Herald still works. It happens that Clark Kent interviewed her, and that's, why she's a familiar face. Let's go there now. I wish I could help Superman, but I don't know a thing about any Atomic Knights. Or about Gardner Grail. Sorry, the name doesn't ring any bell. Of course, Superman has a picture of Gardner Grail handy. Good Lord. It was a simulation experiment designed to tell us how an average soldier would react to a post-nuclear war situation. Gardner was placed in a sensory deprivation tank and hooked up to an advanced computer. Is it possible that after all this time, he's still in there? It's like Marine is saying, oh, that Gardner Grail? We just forgot him in a basement. As soon as that happens, Marine is able to take Superman right into that basement where Gardner Grail, fully visible, by the way, is hooked up to a machine. And we see a screen playing the fantasy world that Gardner happens to live in. It's been theorized that all humans possess latent mental abilities, potential superminds, that only a few of us ever learn to tap. In a setting where his actual physical senses were being totally deprived, Gardner could have unlocked that vast potential, and he may have used his newfound abilities to take over the simulation scenario, altering it drastically. Sounds plausible, but why would he have done it? Because the utter devastation of a nuclear holocaust that the simulation posited was too ghastly for the mind of the average person to cope with. So instead of a world of helplessness, despair, and suffering, Gardner reprogrammed the simulation to create a fantasy world of great adventure. A place where he would emerge as a hero who was in charge of events rather than the faceless victim of them. Now that we remembered the guy in the basement, Marine figures out why it's all happening. It's Gardner Grail's mind that's behind all the false military alerts and other apparent computer failures. His subconscious is determined to make his post-Holocaust fantasy into reality, and in order to do that, he's pushing the world towards the brink of a nuclear catastrophe. His desire to maintain the fantasy won out, and he banished me from the simulation world. Superman goes to unplug him. His ego is so deeply invested in the fantasy that an abrupt cutoff might do him irreparable psychological harm. I'm afraid we may have no choice. You might have no choice, but if only it were as easy as unplugging the guy. Stop! A knight-shaped robot appears. It's pretty big. Actually, 4 different knights appear. Superman bats the robots into each other because that's what Superman does. He's strong. But then it turns out that one of the robots, the Gardner Grail robot, happens to have access to red sun energy, which is one of the things that makes Superman weak. Then the Grailbot grabs Marine because, of course, Gardner is in love with the only woman available in his fantasy world. And then the robots start fighting with each other. Let her go, Harold. We can't do this. No, we must go on. This is incredible. The robot's personalities are all the creation of Gardner's mind. In actuality, he's battling himself. And at the same moment, the robot's stopping, grinding to a halt. Grail must be losing control. He's unable to keep this robot fighting out here. Gardner, please listen. You have to face reality, and what you know is the truth. Douglas Harold isn't my brother. He's my husband. At her words, the giant robot freezes still for a pregnant instant, and then, no! And of course, because we're dealing with nuclear apocalypse, there's a countdown. 9. By scanning all these controls at super speed, 8. Logic and some educated guesses should tell me 7. What each switch does, 6. Then I can reprogram the entire system, 5. To stop the launch and any other surprises it might be holding, 4. There, now if I reset it right, 3. And haven't overlooked one of the possibilities that could go wrong, 2. And if I finished in time, 1. And that's where Gardner wakes up. Marine. Dr. Harold. Please call me Marine, Gardner. How? What's going on here? Is the war over? Why, no. There wasn't any war, was there? It was all... Oh my God, what was I doing? It wasn't your fault. You were only a pawn. Believe me, Gardner, you weren't responsible. But you don't see, Marine. We're all pawns until we decide to take responsibility. Superman may have saved us this time, but even he can't banish the specter of nuclear war alone. This whole project was misguided from the start, trying to figure out how to live in a post-Holocaust world, how to keep making war in it. To believe that civilization can continue in the face of that cataclysm is a fantasy as monumentally false as the one you helped me to give up here today. And all we have to do, all of us, and now, because the clock is ticking for every man and woman and child on Earth, and the countdown is on. And that there is DC Comics Presents Superman and the Atomic Knights. That was issue number 57 from 1983. Back in the 1980s, I was really, really scared of bombs falling and nuclear war and world destruction. As a kid, this was one of the heavier superhero books that I could remember up until Alan Moore hit the scene a couple years later. Today, I think that this story has a lot in common with Alan Moore's works of the same period, like Marvel Man, for instance. Both books took a silly 1950s property and updated them to the modern day and added some nuclear context and world destruction ideas. Very different takes overall. Those were some of the key themes that were happening in the 1980s for a lot of creative folks. It left me with questions, at least. And even now, I don't really have the answer for fear. At the very least, I'm glad that there is a glimmer of something hopeful in the world. And that's where I'm going to leave you. What do you think about this issue? Put your thoughts in the comments, as well as suggestions for other pop culture tidbits I should be hitting up. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. Thanks for joining, and we will see you when the other shoe drops.